Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to another 80s Horror Friday with a slasher which I had never seen, but I've heard it brought up in conversation and on podcasts a few times recently, so I decided, with all the positive speak, I should finally check it out, which is The Prowler from 1981, also known as Rosemary's Killer. Now, I heard this one mentioned and wondered, would it just be nostalgia? You know, is this something from like the Wayback Machine, which somebody grew up with, never really lost their love of, and would it actually even hit me the right way? You know, the same way as them? Would I really have that same appreciation? And I've seen it before, and I've even actually been on the giving side of that, recommending something which is close to my heart, mainly due to nostalgia, memories growing up with it, or some other association, only to have it not land well with somebody who's new to it. But at any rate, I checked it out after a long weekend of binging several films. But what is this film about? The Prowler? Well, the synopsis is as follows. An unknown killer, clad in World War II U.S. Army fatigues, stalks a small California town bent on reliving a 35-year-old double murder by focusing on a group of college kids holding an annual graduation dance. Now, if that synopsis doesn't scream slasher, I don't know what will. We've got a graduation/anniversary situation, these college kids, a small town, and seeing as this is from 81, these tropes didn't really feel like tropes yet. They were new compared to, a decade or so later when we were seeing them much more frequently, and they were presented very seriously because of that newness. So without giving a play-by-play on this, I'll stick to the overall feel and why I think this one is worth checking out. So, first off, the characters. Nobody really stuck out as bad or as ones that you want them to be taken out. Sure, some of them get a bit drunk and disorderly during the celebration, maybe act a bit harsh here and there, but for the most part I liked everyone, which made this work since I cared about them. I didn't want any of them taken out. I wasn't waiting for people to be killed due to finding them insufferable, waiting for the kills and enduring what was in between. They were all pretty likable, and I was interested in following them around throughout this night, seeing what they were up to as they bring this graduation dance to life. Second, they do a really good job setting up the mystery in this, and make me want to try to figure out who is behind it. Of course, having seen a lot of films like this, well before the reveal, and simply through the process of elimination, I was pretty sure of who it was, and I was right, but that really didn't ruin anything for me. I was there for the entire journey, which they kept it at about the 90-minute mark. It never dragged or kind of went off in some random direction with the story. Third, the kills. Now, not just for 81, but just even for today, they were graphic, violent, and really great. They were very detailed, very bloody. And when I say violent, I don't just mean in, just that, it's killing. I mean the performance behind it. There's lots of struggling and kicking and twitching, the life kind of slowly draining, and it's looking really painful. And part of these events, these kills, which kind of, sealed the deal, were the effects. Tom Savini was behind this. I saw that referenced in like a synopsis before queuing it up. But they were great, and it reminded me of everything that I'd grown up with, because like some people of my generation have mentioned, back in the 80s I saw the Scream Greats Volume 1 about Tom Savini, showing how these effects are done, and it really positively affected my love of horror movies. Kind of like that Insider Baseball style doc, which, while I would still wince at some of the really hardcore effects and, everything happening story-wise, I would also marvel at kind of how they were able to pull them off back in the day, and even nowadays when we do a lot of practical effects. And fourth and final, I'll get up to that final in just a moment here, while I was skimming for some additional information, some additional pieces about this, I also saw it was directed by Joseph Zito. Now, I love horror, but I forget names all the time. So that name didn't ring a bell for me, and I'm not sure if it did for you just now, but this is the same director as Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter. Yep, part 4, fourth and final. The one with Corey Feldman himself killing off Jason seemingly once and for all, because of course they bring him back in part 6, but it happens to be my favorite of the franchise. I could go on, but I'll put up a link at the end to one of my videos which specifically follows what I call the Tommy Jarvis trilogy, if interested in more. But in summary, I loved that. I loved it in part 4. They really did definitively kill Jason. That was the plan. But of course, they went ahead with a head slice instead of a decapitation so they could bring him back, which they did in part 6. And then there was a copycat in part 5. But anyways, doing my usual rambling here, back to the Prowler. I had a lot of that look and feel, the same pacing, everything that I loved so much in the later film, in Friday the 13th Part 4. I think also, like, the most recent mention I'd heard of this was just this week, director Joe Lynch on his podcast that he and Adam Green run, The Movie Crypt, which I've mentioned previously in an interview with the creators of The Last Video Store, another film that's definitely worth checking out. It was in reference to, like, back in the day working at a video store and the recommendations you could receive or give for alternative titles if something was out. I think in the case that they gave was people asking about Scream 2, but it's out of stock, so they referenced, hey, check out The Prowler, and people really enjoying it. So, of course, I finally did, and of course, I obviously loved it. I liked the characters, the setting, the storyline. So the mystery, that mystery also worked in almost like a Scooby-Doo kind of way, even though I figured out who was behind it and would like to have known maybe a little bit more behind why. Maybe I just missed something, but it still worked really well. And those kills, violent, scary, gruesome, which putting all that together made this one more than worth checking out. And speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out my latest video here for The Prowler from 1981, which at the time of this video is in a few places, luckily. It's on Shudder, Amazon, Night Flight, Philo. So if it sounds interesting and you enjoy slashers, go ahead and head on over to check it out. Now, I should add that throughout the weekend, I watched a lot of other movies, including the first 4 of the Final Destination films in prep to see Tony Todd's final performance in Final Destination Bloodlines, coming out just a little bit after this video, I think within the next 2 weeks. And they just aren't really my thing. What Transformers are to action movies, I feel like Final Destination is to horror. The first one has its moments, generally enjoy it, but what they kind of bring more and more to the forefront in the others, well, it's just not really my thing. It has its audience, and has its fans. It's definitely successful and great, but it's just not for me. I'd also checked out the 1980 film Mother's Day, which is fun, but filled with a lot of like those low budget problems here and there throughout it. Definitely worth the watch, almost like a party movie to riff on. But these films, in comparison to The Prowler, may have skewed my opinion a bit. So your results for this film may vary, like all my recommendations. Anyways, that's all I've got for this one. Thanks for coming by and sticking around to the end. If you enjoyed, please give me a thumbs up. And if not already subscribed, consider subscribing and hitting that bell icon to get notifications for when I put up new content, which is typically 1 to 3 times a week. Fridays is every week. I do an 80s horror film. Mondays, occasionally, usually a non-horror 80s throwback, especially if I haven't seen that 80s film in a long time or haven't heard much mention of it in a while, to see if it holds up. And once in a blue moon, I'll throw something in there for Wednesday, something a bit different, like a newer title or maybe a supercut of much of my, some of my older content to kind of put that together, because I have over 350 videos now at this point. Anyways, that's all I got for this one. Thanks again for coming by, and I will see you in the next one.